Okay, here we go. The Dundee property market, and an eye-watering, I would say definitely an eye-watering, 63% new build premium as opposed to a resale property. QVT, and let's discuss this. Okay, let's talk about this and let's see what we can do on here. So, the Dundee property market, for example, 63% new build premium. The Dundee landlord, our Dundee landlord, actually recently asked me about this, about why a brand new property she was considering was notably more expensive than a similar second-hand resale home. We call it resale homes, in the same location. How is that possible? Why could there be a differential of so much? Now, the differential right across the whole of Scotland between a new build and a resale property, according to the house price index, is roughly about £100,000 of a difference. In other words, same square foot per square foot, and it's £100,000 a difference. Why is that so different? So let's discuss this. The common question that many homeowners and landlords in Dundee are likely to be pondering at this moment in time. So I decided actually to dig deeper into this and uncover the truth behind this in the new build premium. And the latest statistics offer some fascinating insights. Well, fascinating for me. I'm a statistician. I like numbers, I like figures and all the rest of it. And this will make a huge difference. So let's ask the question then. Actually, John's asked it in the comments straight away. Why do new builds cost more? Well, at first glance, the price difference between a new build and an existing property might be really down to personal preference. Some buyers and tenants prefer a new home which is fresh, which is a modern feel, while others favour the character and I think the reliability of the property that stood the test of time over all these years. But there's more to it than that, than just taste in between a new build and a resale property. Looking at the average price paid for the existing resale properties, homes versus the new build properties in the Dundee city centre council area since 1996, a clear trend is actually emerging. And new build homes command a significant premium. Again, why is that? And we'll discuss it. So between 1996 and 2008 in Dundee, the average new built home sold for £40,271 more than the existing Dundee home, which had been prior built. Yet between 2008 and 2013, the average new build home sold for 2,397, less than the existing Dundee home. That's a weird one. But since 2013, the average new build home has sold for £81,989 more than the existing resale Dundee home. In other words, if you buy a new build, you're going to pay about 80,000 more for the new build than you are to get an existing property the same size. It's already been built previously and it's been there for maybe 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So over the past 29 years, the average new build premium, the additional amount buyers pay for a new build property compared to a resale one, is 63.8%. That's a huge margin in difference. However, if we look over the last 10 years, it's actually more. It's 70.8%. There's a huge difference in terms of that. So this new build premium actually refers to the additional price buyers pay for a newly constructed home compared to a similar resale property. Now, the factors such as modern design, energy efficiency, and developer incentives have actually contributed to this gap, including things like the build standard requirements. There's no surprise in the last 29 years that building control and the government has constantly moved up moved the bar up on new build properties to the point where some new build properties are beyond the normal buyer's reach. And really, it's with this pursuit, this constant pursuit of net zero. Now, let's be honest. What is the benefit to a homeowner to put a ground source heat pump in at the cost of £20,000 if it's possibly going to save them maybe £500 to £600 a year? Think about the payback for that. Because £20,000 to put a ground source heat pump, now you're not going to have that money lying about, so you're going to have to finance it. It's going to be about 6% every single year to finance that. So £20,000 multiplied by 0.06, my trusty calculator, is you've got to pay financing on that every single year at £1,200. And yet you're only saving £600 in your energy bills. So why would you put a ground source heat pump in then? Because new build requirements insist that there has to be some energy efficiency measures built into it. So basically, by buying a new build, now this isn't against new build, this is the, dare I say, idiotic requirements of the Scottish Government to go so far in terms of energy efficiency that the cost is actually is completely prohibitive to the return on investment you would actually get out of it. If you're only saving £600 a year in your utility bills for putting that in, then and you're having to pay £1,200 because you're having to finance it every single year, you're down £600 every single year in your running costs. Think about that. No one thinks about the cost of the mortgage as the running cost of buying the property. And that's one to watch out for when you buy new builds in comparison to a resale property. An existing property is built, it's got a £80,000 differential, or maybe even more now. So this gap actually fluctuates, believe it or not, with market conditions. Well, why is that? You hear me ask. It actually rises the gap and it gets bigger on a stronger market when demand is high, and it actually shrinks when times are tougher. And it's really down to the builder's preference about whether they can actually get a bit more profit out of it or not. So understanding this trend can actually help buyers and investors make more informed decisions about when and what to buy. And that's key, definitely. So let's look at a couple of graphs. I love a graph here. Let's get a couple of graphs up and show you the differential price over the years. I'm just going to do a quick search for this on my database here. Here we go. Right here. Let's get that graph up and let's share that with you. So let's share this and you'll see the differential over the years. So as you can see here straight away, since 1996, the orange line is the average price paid for a new dwelling, and in other words, a new build, and the blue line is the existing properties, the average price paid for that, according to the the Office of National Statistics, which is the HM Land Registry figures, which is everything that's sold throughout the UK itself. This is for Dundee, especially on its own in isolation. So you can see there quite clearly how that gap has got bigger and bigger over the years. And a lot of it is to do with, it can be really ultimately to do with things like when you're getting preference about when you buy a property, if the new build contractors actually fronting your stamp duty up front, if they're paying it all for you, I mean, some of that could be £30,000. You don't really just have that out of your pocket because the bank won't finance that. So you have to find that when you buy a property around about £300,000 to £400,000. So when a new build contractor comes along and a house builder says, I can pay that all up front for you, and you can have a low cost entry, and you don't really need to do anything to the property because it's already pre-built and decorated for you. They maybe give you free carpets, they maybe give you free appliances as well as a result, and they maybe actually do your back garden and actually lay the lawn for you too. That could be highly incentivized and therefore a low entry cost for somebody that's got a lower amount of deposit to buy that property. Hence the reason why it becomes an attractive proposition because of that. These are things you can't really do when you're doing a resale property because the new build property does not have a home report. There's no valuation on it. So it's really market led, and the banks will take the lead from the surveyor on the market lead and what somebody's prepared to pay for it based on comparables and based on the additional resources. Now, when you look at the additional resources, what I talk about is when you look at a resale property and you think to yourself, what do I need to do to that resale property in order to get it to the same standard as the new build property? Now, in an ideal world, that might cost 40, 50,000 pounds. But yet, so how come the difference then is £80,000 between the contractor, between the house builder, and actually the resale property? Because of the margin of profit they're trying to engage in. Hence the reason why they can afford to give you stamp duty for free, and on occasion, land and building transaction tax in Scotland, actually. Stamp duty, most people will know it as that name anyway. And that's that graph, as I said, in here, you can see here. That shows the differential between the two house prices, between new build and resale. And the gap's got bigger and bigger and bigger. And as we try, as not we try, as the government forces us to give more energy efficiency requirements and have a higher standard of building as well, it gets to the point where that gap will get even wider and wider and wider. Possibly even making new build properties out the reach of the normal day-to-day person. And that's the key. We've even seen it with the government and with the local councils actually doing buyback schemes for their stock for affordable rented homes. They've actually opted to buy back resale properties because they looked at new build as well and building them, and they've realised that they can't afford to build new build to rent. It's prohibitive in cost. So where do you draw the line? Do you say, look, the build quality has to be less in order for us to be able to afford this? I think that's a really credible question to ask. Should we have the build standards just a bit less now in order to reduce that gap between this resale property and between the new build property? And especially when you take into account the amount of energy efficiency measures you're putting in place and the cost of that in order to save maybe £1,000 a year in energy bills. Yet you've spent £50,000 trying to make that energy efficiency, and you're financing it at 6%. So it's costing you £3,000 a year, but you're only saving £1,000 a year in energy efficiency. Makes sense economically, doesn't it? Definitely. Now let's look at the other graph here. This actually shows you, I'm going to show you this one. This actually shows you the Dundee homes, the new build versus existing homes, and that's the percentage difference between the new dwellings average price paid and the existing dwellings. So that's what I said before about this is round about the 70% mark, the differential between a resale and a new build property. But you can see actually back in 2001, it was astronomical at 90%. Why is that? Because 2001, the property market had actually tanked. And it was actually very, very low entry to buy a property, a new existing resale property. Hence the reason why new build differential and the margin in that was hugely different. As the property prices began to creep up into 2006, which is down here, you can see how that gap actually started to narrow and get less. And then as building standards came in up to 2007, you can see how that came back down as well. And then obviously after that, 2007, 2008, 2009, the market tanked itself at 20% correction in property prices. Hence the reason why it stayed more or less the same amount. And building standards started to get higher and higher and higher again. And it started to creep up again overall. Now, 2020 was an exception. COVID came in, therefore the numbers dropped like a stone. Because nobody was building anything, nobody was selling anything. So there was no really differential in price because of that. And then it's starting to creep up now when records have begun. 2023, it's at 70%, but I think it's going to go beyond that when we're going to 24 and 25 and onwards. This is a bit limited because the data is collected a year before from the land registry itself. So what are the numbers behind the premium then? Let me discuss that with you, the numbers. Using the latest data up to the 2023, as you saw there on the graph, the difference between the average price paid for a new home versus the average price paid for an existing home continues to highlight a consistent premium. Overall, it's my experience that the premium for a new detached and a semi-detached homes is in the order of 10 to 20%. Well, apartments could be much higher than that. As always, there's exceptions to the rules. So the question that have been laid here by Mark, actually, has said, is why do Why do buyers pay more actually than for a new build? Well, many buyers are willing to pay a premium for a new build. Despite the perception that they're overpriced. One reason is just really personalisation. New homes can be tailored to suit individual needs, especially if you're at the start of the journey and you could put your own tiles in, your own type of style of kitchen in, your own floor coverings in as well, and your own bathroom fittings and fixtures and fittings. That could all be custom built if you're at the early stages of the new build itself. Lifestyles and furniture choices can be another additional example as well. Additionally, there's less requirements for maintenance than older properties, often come with a builder's guarantee, which is typically the 10-year guarantee in the beginning. You've got snagging in the first couple of years, which is usually covered as well by a builder, and providing that peace of mind against unexpected issues that could happen in a resale property as opposed to a new build property. With no need really for immediate refurbishment and repainting, moving is really a hassle-free experience when you buy a new build, isn't it? Another major factor, as I spoke about before, just not let's not forget it. I mean, I played it down and I didn't make it look really attractive for the energy efficiency. But older homes tend to be have poorer insulation and higher running costs overall, whereas modern builds are designed to be more energy efficient, helping to reduce household bills. There's no surprise when I tell you that utility costs will still continue to go up and up and up until we find some sort of major resolution. Well, especially in the UK. France is completely different because France relies on nuclear energy, so their cost per unit is a lot less than the UK itself. So whether we go down that route is another story. In recent years, energy costs have actually risen. As I've said, efficiency is becoming a top priority among many buyers. But just be aware of the fact of the prohibition about the cost to get that energy efficiency as opposed to the return that you would get out of that energy efficiency. If it's going to cost you £20,000 more for a property for energy efficiency to save you £600, then 6% on 20,000 of a mortgage, when you think about it, it's going to be £1,200 a year. So you're actually £600 down in your running costs in the beginning because if you've got a mortgage at 1,200 quid extra for the £20,000 you finance to get the £600 savings in energy efficiency, then you're £600 down. Surprising, isn't it? But you need to think about these things. That's key here. Lifestyle and location definitely come into that as well, I would say. So how do we look at the property market? Is it going to be a boom or is it going to be a bust? One of the most revealing insights from the data is how new build premium actually fluctuates with the property market cycle. Let me give you an example. In a strong, buoyant market, the premium tends to increase as buyers compete for new stock and developers' prices increase accordingly. This premium shrinks in a slower market. It's a more challenging market, offering better value for money for those looking to buy new. Nationally, the premium was higher before the global financial crisis in 2008 and 2009 compared to afterwards for that. So this means that if budget is your primary concern, timing is crucial in this. Purchasing a new build property and home in a softer market, in other words, a more challenging market, it could be a smarter financial move than actually buying it in a property boom. This is why I often tell a lot of people the best time to buy and sell a property is winter. Sorry, come again? Yeah, I said it. Best time to buy and sell a property is winter because no one tends to put their house on the market. So you're competing against less properties when you're selling. And then it also goes with that as well. There's less properties on the market. So when you do find a property at that point in time, it's often you get it at a better price as opposed to a market where there's a lot of choice in the spring and in the summertime when people are competing against each other to get their house sold in time to get their next dream home or in time to have a deadline. For example, new baby coming along. For example, new start at the school and need to be in the house before then. For example, want to be in before Christmas. want to be in before the school season. All these different things have major factors in everybody's lifestyles and everybody's day-to-day living. So these are things you've got to think about when you want to buy and when you want to sell a property. Now, for anybody, if your circumstances drives this, in other words, new baby coming along, you've got job relocation, you've got to upsize, you've got to downsize because you've got to downsize because of ill health. You've got to get a bungalow, you've got to get rid of the stairs. It's maybe not suitable for you because you can't do one level living in your existing house that you've got, and you maybe have to downsize as a result of it. A first time buyer coming onto the market. If circumstances drive you, then the answer about when should you put your house on the market is always now. Don't wait. Don't gamble with the market because you never know in 6 months' time, this could be a completely different housing market. Economy might have turned. It might have gone down. It might have had a challenge. Therefore, the housing market would be different. Therefore, the price you would get for your property might be different. Therefore, the number of buyers you might have for your property might be a lot less. Economy might have boomed. Therefore, the next property you go to buy might be a lot more. And it might be out your reach now because 10% on your house, if you're upsizing, 10% on your house at £100,000 is 10 grand. 10% on a £300,000 is at £30,000. That's the difference. So when you're going up, you're paying a lot more in a boom market. So don't gamble with that. The whole point of having a house is to live in the house and use it to the best of its ability, and it hedges you against fluctuations in property prices. Unlike if you're renting, for example, or if you've not bought yet, then you're open to the market. In 6 months' time, if the market goes up, then you have to pay more. You don't have anything to hedge you against. You don't have a house to hedge against. And that's the difference. That's what you should think about when you're doing that. So when I look at this overall, the reality of comparing like for like homes, for example, let's talk about this because it's been asked already in the comments over here. I've got a comment section down the side of my screen, and we're streaming over a number of channels here, so I get comments from other channels and questions from other channels as well. It's important to acknowledge that comparing new build and second-hand or resale properties, Dundee properties, isn't always straightforward. This is the proviso here. Unlike cars, for example, where a brand new vehicle and a low mileage second-hand vehicle can probably be directly compared, housing has more variables at play. Location for one, build quality is another. Developer reputation is key and tantamount here. And incentives like part exchange or stamp duty contributions, uh, low entry deposit. All these incentives make a fundamental difference about, new build properties and like for like homes and why you should care. So don't just assume everybody's the same. By their very nature, the type of Dundee homes that have been built as brand new homes in 1 year can be completely different from existing Dundee homes that have been sold even 2 years before it had been built and completed. Therefore, well, also that every new home sold in the year, the number of existing homes in each region of 5 to 7, depending on location. Therefore, a perfect like for like comparison would require identical properties. So be careful of that and don't fall foul of that. There is different build qualities as well. Some house builders will decide to finish off in solid wood upstairs. Some house builders will cut corners and finish off, well, they'll have solid wood and facings and skirtings downstairs. They'll have maybe MDF upstairs instead. Some might tile and some might wet wall. Some might use different higher quality bathroom fittings and some might use lower quality kitchen fittings. So you've got to think about all these different things that come into play about what you want and how long is it going to really last. You buy cheap, you buy twice. Typically, that's what happens. That's the old expression, isn't it? So you really need to take that into account. Not all properties are side by side are the same condition, and that scenario rarely exists itself. This complexity actually means that while the individual premium is a useful benchmark, it should be taken with a pinch of salt. Your individual circumstances always play a role in this. So here's my final thoughts just to finish off on this on the Dundee property market and that differential in terms of the new build premium to resale property. Should you pay a premium for a new build? Well, it depends on your priorities, doesn't it? The extra cost might actually be worth it if you value a pristine Dundee home with the latest design and efficiency standards. However, if maximisation and value is your goal, buying a resale property is probably the best way to go. Or your timing of the purchase of a brand new home in a weaker market could even be a better move. What are your thoughts on this? I'd be interested to hear. Have you paid a premium for a new build property in the Dundee area, or do you prefer the character of a resale property? You know, the traditional stone built properties built in the early 1900s, mid 1900s. They're beautiful creations. It will stand the test of time for years and years to come. We've yet to decide whether a new build property will actually last as long. Remember that. I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments. Until next time, guys, I'm Jim Parker for Dundee Properties TV. It's bye-bye for now.